So, Cabinet has decided that South Africa's diplomats in Israel will be recalled for further consultation on the situation in Gaza. The minister in the presidency, Ntshavheni, made the announcement in Pretoria when she briefed the media on the outcomes of last week's cabinet meeting. Ntshavheni says Pretoria is disappointed with Israel's continued bombing of schools and clinics in Gaza and the closure of humanitarian passages.
A genocide under the watch of the international community cannot be tolerated. Another Holocaust in the history of humankind is not acceptable. And the South African government has decided to withdraw all its diplomats in Tel Aviv for consultation. Cabinet has also noted the continuing disparaging remarks of the Israeli ambassador to South Africa about those who are opposing the atrocities and the genocide of the Israeli government. This is despite the condemnation by the previous ambassadors of Israel to South Africa, who were clear that the acts of the Israeli government are a repeat of apartheid and not different to the apartheid antics. The position of the ambassador of Israel in South Africa is becoming very untenable. Cabinet has decided to instruct DECO to take necessary measures within the diplomatic channels and protocols to deal with the conduct of the ambassador of Israel to South Africa.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba is visiting South Africa and will be in conversation with Minister Naledi Pandor. Let's speak to Khayelihle Khumalo, who's following that in Pretoria. Khayelihle, thank you. So, this, of course, the focus here will be on the conflict in Ukraine, but what has been said about Israel considering this very important diplomatic decision announced today?
Well, that's right, Francis. Quite a very bold decision there by the South African government. But of course, I mean, when you do follow the developments around the Middle East and also looking at the resolution of South Africa's governing party, the ANC, how they've just been calling for those diplomatic ties with the state of Israel to be downgraded. I think this is quite a very just move that is not surprising. But something that is quite important here, Francis, is that as Dr. Naledi Pandor is hosting her counterpart from Ukraine prior to their private meeting. She really just made mention of the current situation in Gaza, saying that it's a carnage, talking about the senseless destruction of infrastructure, but also calling for the international community not to sit back, to do something really in terms of making sure that there is a cessation of violence as the escalation of the conflict continues and so many civilians caught up in the crossfire. And also something also that's very concerning is that as much as the Israeli government has been saying that for them they're targeting the capabilities of Hamas, but if the schools, the hospitals and many other institutions are targeted, it really raises quite a number of questions. But also, most importantly as well, Francis, Ukrainian Minister Kuleba as well, indicating that they are calling for the cessation of hostilities in the Middle East and calling for the peace to be restored, but also most importantly emphasizing the issue of the two-state solution, clearly indicating that this is a very tough time for the Middle East.
The significance of the talks underway. What is hoped to come out of this meeting and the visit of the Ukrainian foreign minister in South Africa?
So it's quite a number of expectations in this regard, Francis. As you know, that South Africa and Ukraine do enjoy a very cordial relationship, albeit at times it's very challenging, especially in light of the current conflict that's underway. But we saw earlier this year President Cyril Ramaphosa leading some African leaders with the peace mission, meeting with President Zelensky, emphasizing the issue of the importance of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, but also also raising concerns about the current crisis that is unfolding with so many civilians dying in this conflict, but also calling for the cessation of hostilities, also reaching out to the Russian Federation, President Putin as well, pointing out that this current conflict really is having far-reaching implications in the African continent. So many countries do really experience cost of living crisis and also a very expensive grain in light of this conflict. But also apart from that, this is an opportunity for these two countries to renew their bilateral ties, to look at new ways of making sure that they fortify these very important ties. But also for Ukraine, it's quite important. You do know that South Africa, notwithstanding its own challenges, it's still seen as a gateway to Africa, but also still seen as a very influential country in the continent. So it's quite important to have very good relations with South Africa.
And remember, South Africa was criticized for its response, initially said to be closer to Russia. So is Ukraine really trying to forge those relations because of the immediate impact that could have in the conflict? Because Africa, like you say, South Africa is influential across this continent.
Well, very much so, Francis. We do know that South Africa has been very defensive when it comes to its non-aligned position. And for them, they do insist that it's quite important to open the line of communication with the Kremlin, with Kyiv itself, so that they are able to reach out to the warring parties to understand that finding a long-lasting solution remains a very important issue. But also we do know that, for example, the Russian Foreign Affairs Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has had an opportunity to have a charm offensive in the African continent. So it's quite a very important opportunity for Ukraine as well to rekindle those diplomatic ties with the African continent, and also really so that the continent also does understand the position of Ukraine. For example, when you look at the voting of the United Nations General Assembly, South Africa has been abstaining on numerous occasions because some of those resolutions really are crafted without their consultation. So it's a very important opportunity, but also to get an update, Francis, as you recall that in October we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa once again with his Ukrainian counterpart, President Zelensky, having a telephonic conversation about this conflict, looking at ways of making sure that we do see a finality of this conflict. But also something that is very important for the Ukrainians, we know that come December as well, the European leaders are going to meet. Ukraine is still trying to be a member of EU bloc. So it's quite important for them to be seen as a very good standing member, so to speak, within the international community, to meet all those litany of criteria to be able to be a very full member of the EU.
All right, Khayelihle Khumalo live for us in Pretoria. Thank you very much.